Welcome to a new episode of UpStream. We are excited to discuss the new season of Squid Game. I am Parisa, and here's my co-host, Ontora. Ontora, what's your one-word review of Season 2?
Could have been better. Not one word, technically, but you get the point.
It's not a bad season, per se, but it introduces a lot of new threads that might unravel in the next season.
Yeah, definitely. Let's dive right in.
So Seong Gi-hun's arc this season, massive shift, right? He's no longer just this naive everyman stumbling through the first games. Now he's like driven with this almost obsessive need to take down the system.
Right, but I mean, can you blame him? He literally watched people die in front of him.
More than that, though. He's grappling with survivor's guilt. Like, the money didn't solve anything for him, you know? It's a classic case of winning the game, but losing your humanity.
I mean, sure, but also, if I won that much cash, I can't lie. I don't know, book a one-way ticket to Bali or something.
On Torah, that's exactly the kind of moral contradiction the show's poking at. Gi-hun can't escape because he knows that by benefiting from his win, he's complicit in the system. He's trying to turn his guilt into action, but it's messy, right? It's not exactly heroic.
Okay, fair, but aren't we all kind of complicit in systems that exploit people? Like, I bet you're sipping coffee that was harvested in questionable conditions right now.
Ah, touche. Anyway, that's sort of the point. The show forces you to examine those contradictions in, the most extreme way possible. And speaking of contradictions, let's talk about Gong-yu's recruiter. His expanded backstory? Haunting.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he's such a mood.
A mood?
Not in a good way. He's both terrifying and, I don't know, kinda tragic. You see how the same system that destroys the players has eaten him alive too. He literally went from slapping people to basically, being their corporate overlord.
Right? It's the cyclical exploitation. The system turns the oppressed into enforcers of oppression. He may embody power within the games, but he's just as trapped as anyone else. And there's this chilling moment where you can sense he's aware of what he's doing, but resignation keeps him going.
Yeah, when he's recruiting someone, you can literally see it in his eyes, like a dead inside vibe. Honestly, award-worthy acting right there.
Totally. And the constant thing Squid Game drives home is that desperation leads to such heartbreaking choices. These people know the games are inhumane, but poverty forces them back in. That's both the brilliance and horror of the narrative. It holds up an unflinching mirror to the viewer.
Yeah, what would you do if you were in their shoes? I don't want to sound too casual, but the way they show this desperation, it's you can't even judge the players, you just feel bad for them.
Exactly. And that's why this season leans even harder into the moral compromises we make in extreme scenarios. It's not just survival, it's survival at the cost of your soul. Gi-hun's journey, Gong-yu's quiet menace, they're both reflections of that dilemma. And the craziest part? It's not far off from the real world.
And speaking of heartbreaking choices, that pregnant woman, her storyline just wrecked me. I mean, risking not only her life but her baby's future, it's just impossible to even fathom.
Right? That's the thing, though. Her presence really ups the emotional stakes. It's not just one life on the line, it's generational stakes on Torah.
Yeah, and I feel I don't know what you think, but I feel it's kinda unfair they made her situation so heartbreaking. Of course we're rooting for her, right?
True, but that's the brilliance of Squid Game, in a way. It forces these impossible choices, so you can't help but empathize even when you're squirming. I think the best example of that is Hyun-ju.
Oh, the soldier, right. Remind me again, what was her story?
She's a former soldier and a transgender woman. Her reasons for joining the games hit hard. Her whole arc is about survival and identity, and it's handled with so much subtlety. You kind of feel the weight of her struggle in every single scene she's in.
Ugh, yeah, I remember now. Each interaction she had, totally gut-wrenching. Honestly, she might be one of the best written characters in the season. Fight me on that.
I won't fight you. Her journey really cuts deep. And it's not just her. Think about how all these players represent different forms of desperation. That's what the games rely on.
Okay, but the games this season, some of them amazing, but others, total flops. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, definitely. Like the Mingle game, brilliant. That creepy children's song paired with life or death stakes? That's the kind of tension that made the first season unforgettable.
But then you've got like the six-legged pentathlon or whatever it's called. I'm sorry, but what even was that? I couldn't keep up, and neither could the rules.
Exactly. It wasn't just confusing, it overstayed its welcome. And don't get me started on the voting mechanics this time. They were supposed to add more tension, but instead they felt, I don't know, repetitive?
So repetitive. Like after the third vote, I was like, can we please just move on? The suspense was gone, it became predictable.
Which is such a shame because the voting concept is so rich with possibilities. It could have added psychological depth, but instead it lost its edge halfway through.
That's what I'm saying. We need more of that first season type of suspense, not just dragged out drama. But okay, let's talk about Thanos. That man stole every scene he was in.
Oh, absolutely. Choi Seung-hyun plays him like this chaotic mix of tragedy and absurdity. He's like chasing fame at any cost, even in the most grotesque circumstances.
And those little outbursts, hysterical. But they also kind of make you want to cry, right? Like he's not playing this game to survive, he's playing it because he sees it as his big break.
Exactly. And it's gut-wrenching when you realize he's just another manifestation of what desperation does to people. Fame becomes his version of safety, no matter how fleeting. It's wild, isn't it? Just thinking about how much the desperation of every character gets amplified by their surroundings. Those pastel playgrounds and candy-colored sets, they're so deceptively innocent, which makes the brutality of the games even more jarring and unforgettable.
Oh, for sure. Like you're looking at these cheerful spaces, but then, bam, someone's life is on the line. It's so creepy but kinda genius.
Exactly. It's almost childlike, which makes the violence feel even more twisted. It's like the aesthetic itself becomes another character. You know? It traps you in this false sense of security and then just tears it apart.
Totally. And I think it's what makes the show so memorable visually. Season 1 had that too. Remember the red light, green light game? It was haunting because it looked like a kid's dream, but was a total nightmare. Same energy here.
It's not just the visuals, though. Performances like Park Sung-hoon's as Hyun-ju, she completely elevates the season for me. Her arc is layered with survival, identity, and trying to find acceptance in this hostile system. It's heart-wrenching.
Oh, 100%. Every scene with her felt so raw, like even when she wasn't saying much, you could just see it in her eyes, the struggle, the pain. Ugh, I can't even.
And what's wild is that her story resonates on so many levels. It's not just about surviving the games, it's about surviving society's harsh realities. There's this unspoken commentary on how people are cornered into impossible decisions because of discrimination and systemic barriers.
Yeah, it really hits you hard. Honestly, Hyun-ju might be one of the best characters in both seasons, and I love how her story isn't just there to shock, it actually adds depth to the whole game's concept.
Exactly. But then I wonder, does the season balance the emotional weight with the spectacle as well as the first one did? I feel like it's relying on the same tricks a bit too much.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like, I love the creepy cute vibes, but sometimes it felt, I don't know, like they were trying too hard to replicate what worked before. It's still good, but it doesn't hit as fresh.
That's my issue too. The visuals and performances are doing so much, but at times, the emotional beats feel like echoes of season 1. It's like they're trying to recapture that magic instead of pushing into new territory.
Yeah, but still, those moments that land, they really land. And honestly, with Hyun-ju alone, I think they justify sticking through the slower bits.
Fair enough. And I guess that contradiction between what works and what doesn't is also kind of what keeps the show so fascinating. And speaking of contradictions, isn't it kind of ironic? Squid Game was meant to be this scathing critique of capitalism, and now well, Netflix's golden child. It's practically a brand at this point.
Oh my gosh, right? Like at this rate, we should just expect Squid Game themed cereal or something. Win or die trying, now with marshmallows.
Exactly. And it's not just Netflix. The success has spawned all these real-life adaptations, like the Beast games from Mr. Beast. And while he's not literally recreating life or death stakes, it still feels strange. The entire concept went from condemning this system to look how fun and marketable suffering is.
Totally. And I bet half the people doing those challenges wouldn't even last 5 minutes in the actual Squid Game. It's all watered down now, just for clicks.
Right. And there's a deeper issue there. When something critiques a system, but then becomes celebrated by the same system, doesn't it kind of dilute the entire message? Squid Game isn't just cultural commentary anymore. It's a product, part of the machine it was calling out.
So meta, but also depressing. Have you seen what the creator said?
Yeah, Hwang Dong-hyuk, his quote was brutal. He said something like, "I'm so sick of this. I'm so sick of Squid Game." And honestly, I don't blame him. Imagine creating something so personal, so critical, and then being sucked into this non-stop cycle of franchising and promotion.
Oh, for sure. Poor guy just wants to chill on a remote island, and Netflix is probably like, where's season 3?
Exactly. It's such a stark example of how even creators aren't immune to being consumed by the systems they criticize. On the one hand, it's a global phenomenon, which is incredible. But on the other, where do you draw the line between success and selling out?
I mean, who even knows anymore? Everything gets merchandised these days. Even critiques about exploitation can end up getting exploited. It's just wild to think about.
And Squid Game is the perfect case study for that dichotomy, right? It's this story about the consequences of unfettered greed and desperation, but now it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise. The critique and the commercialization are completely entangled.
You'd almost think it was intentional, like some next level commentary, except, nah, it's just capitalism doing its thing. And speaking of things that leave you thinking, how wild was that ending? I mean, it really had me sitting there just staring at my screen, trying to process everything. Like, where do we even go from here?
Right? They really left us hanging. The season spent all this time unraveling these complex stories, only to slam us with a last-minute cliffhanger. It's like it was daring us to lose our minds while waiting for season 3.
Haha, mission accomplished because, girl, my brain, broken. But real talk, do you think they can pull off a solid season 3 after this kind of build-up?
Honestly, I don't know. The stakes are sky high now. They've got to carry the weight of all these unresolved threads, from Gi-hun's mission to Jun-ho's fate.
And Gong-yu's recruiter, like, is he gonna completely flip or what?
Exactly. And therein lies the challenge. How do you resolve these plot lines in a way that feels satisfying, but also true to the story's tone? Plus, let's not forget, season 2 wasn't exactly flawless.
Yeah, like, I loved parts of it, but let's be real, season 3 has to tie it all together without rehashing stuff. They can't just recycle the same twists again, you know?
Right. They need to innovate while staying rooted in what worked originally. And let's face it, the world's expectations are massive. This isn't just a show anymore. It's a global cultural juggernaut. That kind of pressure, it can make or break the next season.
But like no pressure or anything, right? Poor Hwang Dong-hyuk's probably hyperventilating in a corner somewhere.
Probably. But here's the thing. If anyone can do it, it's him. He's shown before that he can weave social commentary, emotional depth, and suspense into a story that resonates deeply. If season 3 leans into those strengths, instead of the overly dramatic moments that drag down parts of season 2, I think there's hope.
Fingers crossed. I mean, I'm rooting for it. Even with all its flaws, I'm hooked. They've got me, and I know I'm not alone. Like, when it drops, you know we're binging it immediately, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're going all in. And hey, for all its shortcomings this season, Squid Game still managed to leave us talking, debating, and questioning, you know? That's not nothing.
Totally agree. It's messy, but it's also bold. And honestly, that's part of the fun, getting to argue with you about it.
Fair enough. And on that note, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what season 3 brings. Until then, thanks for tuning in, everyone. This has been such a fun conversation.
Yeah, you guys are the best. Catch you next time, and don't forget, never trust a smiling recruiter in a suit. Bye.